Hello, my name is Stephanie Garner, and I am the Director of Parent Support and Education with Down Syndrome Indiana. And I'm really excited to be talking with you today about parenting a child with Down syndrome. This presentation is for birth parents, adoptive parents, foster parents, and anyone who finds themselves parenting a child with Down syndrome. By no means is this presentation going to cover everything you need to know about parenting a child with Down syndrome. But my hope is that it could be a good starting point for you to learn a little bit, gather more information, and we can help you figure out where to go from here. So let's get rolling. So, what is Down syndrome? So, Down syndrome is the most commonly diagnosed chromosomal condition in the United States. It was first named for the physician who first characterized the condition back in the 1860s, Dr. John Langdon Down. Now, Dr. Down did not have Down syndrome, so there's no apostrophe S at the end of Down syndrome. So when we're talking about Down syndrome, we don't want to say Downs. We always want to say Down syndrome, the whole title. Down syndrome is actually more common than you would think. About 1 in every 691 or 1 in every 700 babies born in the United States will have Down syndrome. There are about 350 to 400,000 people living in the United States with Down syndrome, and about 7 to 8,000 people in Indiana who have Down syndrome. The next question that I want to answer is, what causes Down syndrome? And I'll give you a basic science lesson because if you're anything like me, you don't remember what you covered in school. But basically, each of us at the very earliest stages of cell division, we get 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad. And those chromosomes pair up. So we have 23 pairs. So you and I have 46 chromosomes in every cell in our body. In an individual with Down syndrome, at the very earliest stages of cell division, instead of a duplication at chromosome 21, we have a triplication. And it is really important to note that there is nothing that mom or dad does to cause that baby to have Down syndrome. We don't know why it happens. It is a genetic anomaly in almost all cases. There are a few types of Down syndrome, though, that are hereditary. So let's talk about the different types of Down syndrome. The only time we really focus on the type of Down syndrome that your loved one has is at diagnosis, because when you do the karyotype testing and officially get that diagnosis, that's when you're going to find out which kind of Down syndrome your baby has. But when it comes to supports and services, it really doesn't matter whether it is trisomy 21 mosaic or translocation, because for the most part, Down syndrome is Down syndrome. But this is just interesting bit of science. So 95% of people that you meet with Down syndrome are going to have trisomy 21. That is where we have a third copy of the 21st chromosome in every cell in the body. Definitely, this is the most common type of Down syndrome. The rarest form of Down syndrome is called mosaic Down syndrome, and that happens in 1 to 2% of people that you'll meet with Down syndrome. And this is where you have a third copy of the 21st chromosome in some cells, but not all of them. And then the third type is translocation. And this is where that third copy of the 21st chromosome actually attaches to a different chromosome. And interestingly enough, this happens in about 3 to 4% of the people that you meet with Down syndrome. And it is the only type of Down syndrome that has a hereditary component. So that means if you have a baby with Down syndrome and you want to have future children, depending on what type of Down syndrome they have, you may not have an increased likelihood of having future children with Down syndrome. The only way that you would have an increased likelihood of having a future baby with Down syndrome is if your baby has translocation Down syndrome. So just an interesting piece of information that I always like to share. If you are really interested in this, want to know more about this, what type of Down syndrome your child has, and what this could mean for future children in your family, I would highly recommend that you go see a genetic counselor. They can do the testing, look at the testing, and then really delve into what all of this means. So people with Down syndrome have some common characteristics. That extra 21st chromosome gives them some physical characteristics that are similar to other folks with Down syndrome. So people with Down syndrome tend to have what we call almond-shaped eyes. They tend to be a little shorter in stature than their typically developing peers. They tend to have a flat or absent nasal bridge, which can make finding a pair of glasses really challenging. They tend to have a single palmar crease, where most of us have two main creases, and they tend to have an intellectual disability that ranges from mild to moderate. Does that mean that a person with Down syndrome can't learn? No, people with Down syndrome can learn so much. It just takes them a little bit longer, a little bit more effort to learn things that might come easily to you or I. Now, you'll notice in all of those characteristics, I said people with Down syndrome tend to. And that means that not everyone with Down syndrome will have every characteristic associated with Down syndrome. People with Down syndrome tend to look more like their parents or their siblings than they do other people with Down syndrome. But they definitely, there are these common characteristics that are very identifiable. Despite this extra chromosome, though, and despite these characteristics, people with Down syndrome are more like us than they are different. And that is, I think, highlighted when we talk about strengths and challenges. There are things that people with Down syndrome are really good at, and things that they are, that they need a little extra help with, challenges that they have. And if you think about it, kind of just like the rest of our population, right? There are things that I am super, super good at. I'm an amazing, I'm not gonna brag on myself. I'm also not gonna tattle on myself and tell you all the things that I'm really bad at, right? Things that I'm really, really good at and things that I really, really struggle with. And that's okay, right? That's what makes me the cool individual person that I am. And folks with Down syndrome are the same. They have things that they're great at, things that they really struggle with. So we're going to start talking today about some of the challenges that our folks with Down syndrome face. And we want to talk about ways that we can support our individuals with Down syndrome in those challenge areas. And then we're going to finish by talking about how do we promote their strengths? How do we take those strengths and build upon them? So let's keep moving. People with Down syndrome have challenges in a few key areas. Folks with Down syndrome can have some medical concerns that our typically developing kiddos don't face. So babies, children, and adults with Down syndrome can have increased chance of developing a host of health conditions that they'll be at an increased risk compared to typically developing individuals. So one of the things that is really important is that you have a copy of the healthcare guidelines for children with Down syndrome. There are also healthcare guidelines for adults if you happen to have someone who's a little bit older with Down syndrome. There are healthcare guidelines for adults with Down syndrome as well, but have a copy of those healthcare guidelines and be familiar with them. I'll talk a little bit more here in just a couple minutes about how you can get those healthcare guidelines and what they are like, but that's really important from a very early stage. If you received a new parent packet from Down Syndrome Indiana, there is a copy of those healthcare guidelines in that new parent packet, or if you didn't receive that and you want to get one, or if you just want to get a copy of the healthcare guidelines, feel free to reach out to Down Syndrome Indiana and we can email that to you and make sure that you have that to take with you to your physician. Because folks with Down syndrome can have some increased medical concerns, health conditions, it's really important that you have a good, strong medical team. And the basis of that medical team is going to be your pediatrician or your primary care physician. Now, it is really important that that is the person who is heading your child's well visits, that they're the person that you're able to go to when your kiddo is sick. If they're not feeling well and they need to get in to see somebody to get started on medicine, your pediatrician or primary care physician is the person that you're going to go to. Now, it's wonderful if you have a pediatrician or primary care physician who's really knowledgeable about Down syndrome. That's the dream, the pie in the sky. But that person doesn't have to be really experienced in Down syndrome. You can also make sure that you give them a copy of the healthcare guidelines. And as long as that individual is willing to learn and work with you and listen to you, as long as you have a good team approach, then you're going to be fine working with someone that doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience. You also want to have a developmental pediatrician on your team, at least early on. Developmental pediatricians are physicians that specialize in developmental delays, developmental disorders. And so that individual is someone that you're going to see maybe once a year, maybe twice, and they're just there to check in with you and make sure that your kiddo is hitting their developmental milestones and that you're not missing any piece of the puzzle. This is not the physician that you will see for a cold if your kiddo is sick, but they are the physician who's going to kind of look at that child holistically and say, you know what, I think we might need a referral to this specialist or that specialist. So it's good to have both of those folks on your team. Here in Central Indiana, there are 2 developmental pediatric offices. There's one at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital. There's also one at Riley Hospital for Children. But I know that we also have families that really like the developmental pediatrics group at Cincinnati Children's. I know that Norton Children's in Louisville also has developmental pediatrics. So wherever you're at, hopefully you'll be able to find a developmental pediatric group close to you. Kids with Down syndrome also have developmental delays. Now, a developmental delay is characterized by delays in one or more of the areas of physical development, cognitive, communication, or social and emotional development. Now, many of our kiddos with Down syndrome will be delayed in all of those areas. And the very best thing that we can do for our kiddos is to get them started with early intervention. Early intervention therapies are the best way to help. Here in Indiana, early intervention is called First Steps. And so you can get referred to First Steps very early on. My daughter with Down syndrome, who's now 14, she started with First Steps when she was 3 months old. Your pediatrician can refer you to First Steps therapies, or you can self-refer. You can reach out to them on your own. But First Steps offers physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, nutritional therapy, many other services, but all designed to make sure that your kiddo is getting everything they need to help them meet their developmental milestones as quickly as they can and to keep them on track as best they can. First steps or early intervention therapies are offered from birth until that child turns 3 years old, and those therapies stop on the 3rd birthday. After that, it's important that children continue those therapies, and they can do that through the school system. Our children are entitled to free and appropriate public education from their 3rd birthday until their 22nd birthday. And part of that free and appropriate public education includes access to therapies. So once your child enters the school system, initially in developmental preschool, then elementary, middle, and high school, they will be assessed for PT, OT, and speech. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech. And if there is a need that's found, they will continue with those therapies. Sometimes our kiddos with Down syndrome need a little bit more therapy than what they're getting through the school system. And so we do have a lot of families that will do what we would call an outside therapy. So they may use their primary insurance or Medicaid to see a therapist within like a hospital system or a therapy group, so that like that parent is paying with insurance to go see that therapist. Our kiddos with Down syndrome also tend to have some challenges with behavior. So when we're talking about behavior, it is important to remember behavior is communication. Behavior is always communication, whether it is your behavior, my behavior, or our kiddos' behavior. When behaviors happen, it is important that we, as the adults, put on our detective hat and we say, what is this behavior trying to tell me? Because every behavior tells me something, right? Whether it is, think about maybe you get mad at your spouse and you slam the door because you're just mad, right? We are very verbal adults. We have so many words at our disposal, but sometimes words invade us. We have so many emotions that we're unable to get our words out. Now, imagine what life is like for our kids who don't have a ton of words or maybe don't have any words. Imagine what it would be like trying to go through your day not being able to tell someone, my head hurts. My stomach really doesn't feel very well today. I'm just grumpy. I have no reason for it, but I'm mad and I'm looking for a fight today, right? When we can't tell people that, and our only way to communicate that is through a behavior. Imagine how frustrating that would be for our kiddos. So we have to remember, if we don't like the behavior that our child is exhibiting, we have to look at ourselves, because the only person in this world whose behavior you control is yourself. So we have to look at ourselves and say, what could I do differently to help support this child differently to get a different response from them? So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into all of these challenge areas, and we're going to talk about specifically what we can do in these areas to help support our children, and help bring them out of that challenge. So let's go back to talking about the medical concern. So there are a lot of things that are recommended in the healthcare guidelines for children with Down syndrome, and there is a QR code here on the screen if you want to snap a picture of that. There is also a link if you're not into QR codes and you just want to use the link. The link is on here as well. But it is important that we look at this and we follow these healthcare guidelines. For example, our healthcare guidelines recommend that on a yearly basis, our children with Down syndrome have yearly vision and hearing screens, because we know that our kids tend to have vision and hearing loss at higher rates than the rest of the population. It is also recommended that you have yearly thyroid screens. It is recommended that by the age of 4, your child with Down syndrome has had a sleep study to rule out sleep apnea. All of these things are listed in there. We know that our kiddos with Down syndrome can have increased problems in these areas, increased concerns. So we want to make sure that we are following the healthcare guidelines and that we are doing these screenings on a yearly basis or as often as is recommended, so that we can make sure that our kiddos are being treated as quickly as possible, because so many of these issues factor into other things. Like, for example, if you have a child with Down syndrome who has hearing loss, that is going to affect their ability to speak, to be able to communicate, because if they're not hearing the words that you're saying, they're not going to be as able to repeat themselves. We want to make sure that, that if our child has vision loss, that we are getting them glasses so they can see what's going on around them and participate in the world. Our kiddos with Down syndrome can also have feeding issues that are really important to have addressed. It is not uncommon for little ones with Down syndrome to sometimes need a little extra support because they have what they call a floppy airway, laryngomalacia or tracheomalacia, which just means that the stuff that closes off your windpipe when you swallow isn't working well because their kiddos aren't strong enough early on. And so kiddos can get a little bit of milk that will go down the windpipe and into the lungs when they are swallowing. So some of our kiddos will need a feeding tube, either an NG tube into the nose or sometimes a G tube directly into the belly. And so we want to make sure that we are working with our providers to make sure that our kiddos are getting the treatment that they need, and that we are doing the testing that we need so that when they no longer need that, we know and we have a plan for how to proceed. So following up on these medical concerns, staying on top of it is really, really important. So how do we support developmental delays? So let's kind of break down each of those areas that we kind of talked about. So there were the 5 areas that are involved in developmental delay. So let's start with physical challenges. We want to make sure that when our kiddo is involved in first steps, that we are participating in those appointments, and we want to practice those things at home. I used to work in the medical field, kind of in the therapy, sports medicine world. And I can't tell you how many people I would see come in who would come in like once a week and do their physical therapy and then go home and never do it again. And they really weren't making a lot of great progress, because exercising one day a week doesn't get you very far, right? So if you truly want to see your child improve, we need you to be participating in that therapy appointment to the greatest extent possible, and then learning from the therapist what you need to be doing so that you can start practicing these things at home, because doing it one day a week isn't enough. We want to implement all of these things into our daily routine and our daily life. Um, we want to make sure that we're encouraging our child to crawl, to walk, to climb, obviously with us close by and keeping that kiddo safe, but we want to encourage them to be active and independent. I know as a mom, it becomes really easy to just scoop my child up and carry them everywhere because I'm a lot faster than them and I can keep them safe that way and keep them contained. But our child is only going to get stronger and only going to make those improvements if we allow them the opportunity to crawl, to walk, to explore. So when you can, when you're there and close by, allow them the opportunity to be active. Create obstacle courses for your kiddo around the house so you can practice those skills. Think about like the floor is lava game. My daughter loves this, and we have obstacle courses all the time. And you don't need fancy equipment. I know your therapist, your First Steps, might bring in lots of stuff, but we just cut out some little pieces of foam or even a piece of paper or a piece of cloth, and we put it on the floor shaped like a little rock, and we jump over those. We might climb on the chair. We might put a piece of tape down to be our balance beam. Your imagination is endless. So creating this obstacle course that your kiddo can participate in will really encourage them to get outside their comfort zone and start to test their own limits. We also want to make sure that we are modeling an active lifestyle for our kiddos. So, individuals with Down syndrome can tend to develop some weight issues as they get older. And we want to make sure that we are setting our kiddo up to be as healthy as possible. So, helping them to model that lifestyle, because our kids watch everything that we do and then they take it all in and they replicate it. So we want to take walks as a family, but ride bikes together as a family, go out and do yard work together, be active, play together, because the more that our kiddos see us as the adults engaged in activities, whether maybe we go to the gym and our kiddo works out with us, right? We want our kids to see an active lifestyle, so that's the lifestyle that they're going to model. So how do we support our child in their cognitive challenges? Well, the very first thing we have to remember is we have to make learning fun. If doing a certain activity is a chore, if it's not fun and we're not looking forward to it, how in the world are we going to expect our child to look forward to it? So if you hate to read books with your child, you can expect that they're probably going to also start to hate to read books. If you hate to do laundry with your child, they are also going to hate to do laundry. So we have to fake it till we make it. This is not exactly related to cognitive challenges, but this is my own personal example. I hate cleaning. I hate doing cleaning and chores and all that stuff. Like, but my daughter loves it. And so I pretend I too love it. And when it's time to do laundry, to fold laundry and to put it away, we make it a game and we run and we laugh and we play and we have fun, because she now loves those things. The only time that my bed gets made is when my kid makes me make my bed. But if she tells me to make my bed, I do it every time because she loves it. And the more we can make this fun and engaging, the more she's going to want to do more of it. So we need to do the same with learning. When it comes to counting or reading, we have to love that. We have to enjoy that. We have to make it fun. So expose your child to learning as much as you can from as young of an age as possible. So working it into your daily life, count snacks as you eat them. One cookie for you, one cookie for me, or maybe doing multiple cookies isn't healthy. Maybe one goldfish for you, one goldfish for me, two goldfish for you, 2 goldfish for me. And work on counting. Talk about colors and shapes if you are out on your walk around your neighborhood. When you notice, the red stop sign, stop and talk about that for a minute. Point out letters when you're on your walk. You can stop and point out, like, oh, look at the number on our house. Look, 247. Wow, look at those numbers. 247. That's where we live. Or, oh, look, here's our street sign. We live on Adams Street. Look, Adams. So we really want to, like, be pointing everything out and talking about everything. Sing songs with your kiddos. There are so many great learning songs, right? Not just the ABCs, but there's a really great song about days of the week that is put to the Addams Family tune. Um, there are so many great songs on YouTube and on kids' shows, right? Miss Rachel has amazing songs for learning. Daniel Tiger has some really great songs. I'm blanking on others, but so many great shows out there that your kiddo loves. Don't let the only time that they hear those songs be when they're engaged in their tablet or iPad. You can sing those too, right? Sing them in the car together. Really work on developing, like, ways to work those into your normal daily routine. We want to read to our kiddo every single day. And it's okay if it's the same book every single day. If they love reading, read the book, right? That's so important. Get your child enrolled in preschool. So, developmental preschool is free for our kiddos, and it is through our local school system. It is included in their free and appropriate public education from their 3rd birthday through their 22nd birthday. Well, not preschool. Preschool is only till they reach kindergarten age, but you know what I mean, right? Get them involved in school, or involve them in community preschool. If you have a preschool at your church or a preschool that your other kiddos went to, get them involved in that. That is perfect. Know that children with Down syndrome can be amazing readers. So work on reading. Read to your kiddos, like, be that really good example of this love of reading, that we love to read books. We read books together. It's wonderful. And then know that your child with Down syndrome can also learn to read really well. Our kiddos just tend to read a little bit differently than our typically developing kiddos. So kids with Down syndrome really struggle with auditory processing. So for them to hear something and process it and act on it is challenging. And this is how we teach kids to read, right? Through phonics, which is all auditory, right? I have to hear these sounds and then replicate them, to hear these sounds and blend them together. So phonics is hard for our kiddos with Down syndrome, but they can be amazing sight word readers. So they can read that whole word. So we want to encourage our kiddos to read. And when they're little, this might look like the fact that they've memorized a book. That's okay. If they've memorized a book, that's the very beginning levels of reading. So encourage them to start reading. You can make flashcards of the words that your kiddo sees in books, and they can work on matching their word to a picture. That's the very first way that our kids start to learn to read. They see this word cat and they have a picture of a cat and they say, okay, I know these mean the same thing. This word cat and this picture of a cat, these are the same. And this works even for a kiddo with Down syndrome that maybe isn't talking yet. They can still have a really great sight word vocabulary. We want to use books with repetitive sentence structures. I like apples. I like goldfish. I like crackers. I like whatever else, hot dogs, right? Because then not only are they learning apples, goldfish, crackers, hot dogs, they're also learning the words I like. So they are getting so many words thrown into their sight word vocabulary. But we also want to keep practicing phonics. So we still want to be inputting and teaching that A says ah, B says C says K. And eventually, as we continue to input, our kiddos with Down syndrome are going to figure out phonics. It's just going to typically happen after the fact. We want to point out words in the community when we are out and about, whether it's walking around, at the store, in the grocery store, wherever we're at a restaurant, reading a menu. We want to point out words that we see that they might know. So if I'm looking at a menu and I'm like, oh, look, chicken nugget. You like chicken nuggets? Look, there's chicken nuggets here. Anything that can really help make reading meaningful will help our kiddos want to read more. All right, let's talk now about how do we support communication, because our kiddos with Down syndrome really struggle with communication. Our kiddos with Down syndrome tend to have weaker muscles in their mouth. So forming words is hard. They tend to have narrower mouths and bigger tongues, which makes all of that, putting words together, forming those words, really challenging. Not to mention that they can have things like apraxia, which just means that there's kind of a breakdown between what you got going on up here and getting the word out. There's a breakdown between the brain and the mouth. So communication can be really hard for our kiddos. So ways that we can support communication. Well, first, we want to talk to our kiddos. Narrate your day, talk their ear off about everything, because our kids with Down syndrome watch, learn, and replicate. So we want to be promoting all forms of communication. Sometimes I hear from families that, oh, I really want my kiddo to talk. I want them to be verbal. So we don't want to use sign language, or we don't want to use pictures to communicate, because we want to focus on verbal language. And that is actually, we know from the research, not an issue. We know that any form of communication increases the likelihood of further communication. So if you want your child to be more verbal, just teach them that when you ask, whether it is with a picture, with a sign, or with your words, you get what you want, right? We want them to know. So our kiddos with Down syndrome, many of them are verbal and they have a lot of words that they can use. Some of them rely on sign language. My daughter was very quiet, didn't really have any words when she was younger, but she did really enjoy sign language. She was drawn to sign language. So we watched a ton of baby signing time. And she still, even at 14, uses a lot of sign language. She's absolutely verbal. She can say all these words, but she often pairs the word that she's saying with the sign. So she likes talking about mom, dad. She loves talking about vampires. She loves spooky things. I can't tell you how many times a child signs vampire to me. Talks about vampires. She talks about water. She might sign it. She needs water. That she needs help. She can sign more or all done. She loves to sign no. I hear no a lot. No, 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 or yes. So all of these signs they're super easy to learn. And I know you might be thinking, oh, like there's no way I can learn a whole nother language. I tried to learn sign language once and I failed. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to be fluent in sign language. You need to learn the words that your child needs to learn to communicate. When my daughter was probably about 8, I think she was right at 8, we were in the grocery store one day, and she kept saying something that sounded like Princess Poop, Princess Poop. It took me forever. I was like, what do you want? What are you saying? And it took us forever to figure out that she was actually saying orange juice. Orange juice sounds a lot like Princess Poop, though. And so what we do is when we have a word that she struggles to say appropriately, but she's using a lot, we look up the sign. So I in the grocery store stood and like Googled orange juice and I found out orange juice. Orange juice. And so we started signing that. So she can now sign orange juice if that's what she needs, which is also why I know the word for vampire, because one year at Halloween, she was telling me what she wanted to be. And I wasn't understanding. And it was so long before I figured out she meant vampire. So I said, okay, let's figure it out. It's a V and then the teeth. Vampire. That's the sign. So my sign knowledge is increasing at the same pace as hers. Sign is not her primary form of communication. It's just an extra way for her to help share what she wants, what she needs, and we are learning alongside her. Picture exchange communication can also be great. We used this a little bit when Lily was little, like when she had certain videos that she loved to watch, but she was not verbal at all. So we would have pictures of those videos so that she could grab those and hand them to us to be able to tell us that she wanted to watch Doc McStuffins or, you know, Dora the Explorer or whatever it happened to be that she was wanting to watch that day. Again, any way to encourage your child to communicate will encourage them to communicate more. And we need to be encouraging this communication. Sometimes we can fall into this trap of like, I have to anticipate every need that my child has. This happened a lot to us when my daughter was a baby because her grandma's babysat her, right? So she was in a situation where like all she had to do was say, and it was, do you need this? Can I give you this? What about this? How about this? Do you want this? How about this? Nope. And like they're throwing everything at her every time she made a little squawk. Um, and she never really had to communicate anything. So we want to make sure that we are encouraging our children to tell us what it is they need. And we have to do it in a way that they can be successful. We don't necessarily want to say, well, if you're not going to tell me, I'm not going to give you anything. If your child is trying to tell you that they need water and you know that they want water and they're not telling you that, then we need to step in and help teach them how to communicate with us. We need to say, hey, it looks like you might need water. Remember how we ask for water? We do a W and put it to our chin. Water, please. Water, please. More water. That was more water. That wasn't please. More water. Um, And we need to encourage them so that they're successful, because the more successful that they are, the more they get what they want, the more they're like, haha, this communication thing is great. And then we also have to remember as parents, we don't want to speak for our children. Very often, we as parents are used to like jumping in and just saying what needs to be said for our kids. So we have to remember to let our kids speak for themselves. That might mean at the doctor's office, if your kiddo is able to say their name, let them go up to the counter and check themselves in. Now, if they're hard to understand, it's absolutely okay to repeat what they said, to paraphrase it. Like often when my daughter walks up to the counter at the doctor, she's really hard to understand. I'll say, "Oh yeah, Lily Garner and Mom here to check in. Great job. High five, man. You did really good." So, but the important thing is that we're encouraging them to communicate on their own. And then we also, again, and I'm going to sound like a broken record on this, we have to remember that behavior is communication. When our kiddos are engaging in behavior, that is communication. And so our job is to figure out, what is this behavior trying to tell me? And then I've got to teach my kiddo how to ask for that appropriately. And that's where all of these communication systems come into play. Maybe that's, I'm going to teach them to ask for water by signing it rather than chucking their water bottle at me. Maybe that means that I'm going to teach them to give me a card for what television show they want to watch rather than, hitting the television a dozen times. But we have to remember all behavior is communication. Okay, so next I want to talk about how do we support the social and emotional challenges that our kiddos might face in that developmental delay. Well, first and foremost, we have to be a good role model. We know that our kids are always watching everything that we do, and they are going to mirror back the things that you do. So If we have a kiddo with Down syndrome that's in a home where there's lots of cursing and inappropriate language, do you know what will happen to that kiddo with Down syndrome? They're going to start using that language. They're going to start cursing. They're going to start using inappropriate language. And I'll tell you what I have found over the years in this community. That kiddo may not be able to say anything clearly, but the F word will come out crystal clear and everyone's going to know what they're saying. That's just the way it tends to go, right? So we've got to make sure that we are acting as good role models for our kiddos. Um, this this goes for like hitting, right? Not to get into a big debate about spanking, but if you hit a child with Down syndrome when you are mad, when they've done something bad, they are going to then do the same thing. When they're frustrated, when you've made them mad, hitting is going to be their way of reacting too, because they watch everything that happens and they replicate. Um, when Lily was little, I think she was reaching for something that was dangerous. And my mom, bless her heart, swatted Lily's hand away because it was dangerous, right? She was trying to stop her. But it ended up looking like she was like swatting her hand. It was like, no, Lily. And just a little bit later, when my mom was trying to do something that Lily didn't want, she slapped my mom in the hand, just, because she's replicating that behavior. So we have to make sure that we are serving as good role models. But it's okay to mess up, right? You're human. We're all human. We're not going to do things appropriately all the time. But when we mess up, we have to acknowledge that we shouldn't have behaved in a certain way, and we have to apologize and make it right. So if I get really mad and I yell at my kiddo, which happens from time to time, what I have to do is say, you know what? Hey, I am so sorry. I should not have said that. I shouldn't have talked to you that way. And I am really, really sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings. And that was not nice of me. Can I have a hug? I'm going to go sit down and take a few minutes to think about what I said. Um, we have to serve as a good role model in how we are working through our feelings, right? Um, we want to encourage social interactions for our kiddos. We want to encourage social interactions with same aged peers. It's okay that those same aged peers may be doing more than your kiddo with Down syndrome, right? Like if we're talking about a 3-year-old, maybe that typically developing 3-year-old is running and jumping and climbing, and your kiddo's just learning to walk. That's okay. The more they can interact with other kids their age, the more they're going to be watching and replicating those behaviors. So those kids are going to be really great role models. We also want to make sure that we are talking about our feelings with our kiddos, because that is how our kids are going to be able to start identifying their own feelings. So when we're really happy, we want to be narrating that to our kiddos, like, oh, I'm feeling so happy today. I feel like I could just do a dance for joy, right? And show them that. If you're having a day where you are feeling really grumpy, talk about that as well, right? We don't have to be perfect all the time, but so we can tell our kiddos, I'm feeling really grumpy right now. I think I need to stop and take some deep breaths. Because taking deep breaths makes me feel better when I'm getting grumpy. What do you do when you feel grumpy, right? Because we're teaching our kids how we navigate the world and how we deal with these big emotions that we have. We also want to help our kiddos develop positive self talk. So, a lot of folks with Down syndrome kind of just live out loud. I sometimes think I don't know that my daughter has a thought that she keeps in her head that she doesn't narrate out loud. I love it. I love hearing what she's thinking about. Um, but this also goes for self talk. And one of the things that makes me so sad is when I hear about a child with Down syndrome that's got negative self talk. Because if a kiddo with Down syndrome is negatively talking to themselves, it's because they're hearing negative self talk. So we want to be providing our kids with that positive self talk that they can then replicate. I love it when I hear a kiddo with Down syndrome who's about to do something really hard, stop and give themselves a pep talk like, you can do it, you can do hard things. Just keep trying. You've got this. Those things are amazing. And I know when I hear those things from a kiddo with Down syndrome, it is because they have a family that's giving them all of those words, who's telling them, you've got this, you can do it. And so that's the kind of self-talk that we want to make sure that we're promoting in our kiddos. Let's talk now about supporting behavior issues. So kids with Down syndrome often have some behavioral challenges because they have that communication delay. And behavior is communication. So, uh, excuse me, common behaviors that you might see in a kiddo with Down syndrome. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is not a list that will absolutely happen to you or your child, but these are things that can be more common in our communities. So we often see kiddos exhibit what we call non-compliance, which is basically not doing what you're told. We also occasionally see kids that will elope, and that is leaving an area that you're supposed to be in. So maybe a kiddo who doesn't want to be in their classroom at school, so they leave the classroom and decide to go out to the playground. Physical aggression can be a common behavior that we see: hitting, kicking, biting. And we also can occasionally see self-injurious behavior. And this is not as common in our kiddos with Down syndrome, but it can happen. And that is hitting themselves, biting themselves, engaging in something that could injure them. So these behaviors, again, could potentially happen. And it is important to remember, again, behavior is communication. So when your child is engaging in that behavior, what are they trying to tell you? We also have to remember that our kids are trying their hardest. They want to be good. They're doing the best they can. So we have to give them grace. So there are four what we call functions of behavior, four main things that are communicated by behaviors. Like all of those communications tend to fall into these four categories. The first one is attention seeking. So your kiddo might engage in a behavior just to get attention. So an example would be if a child puts mulch in their mouth on the playground because they love it when their parent or their teacher comes running over and says, no, 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 get that mulch out of your mouth. They like that attention. And so that's why they keep doing that. Another function of behavior is escape or avoidance. So a child might engage in something to get out of doing a task or an activity. So an example, your kiddo doesn't want to brush their teeth. Maybe they don't like it for whatever reason. And when you pull the toothbrush out and get ready to start, they take off and they run into their bedroom and they hide to try and escape or avoid having to participate in that task. The third function of behavior is access to a tangible item. I like to use us for that, right? Like we go to work every day because we want to earn a paycheck, right? We're not doing it out of the goodness of our heart. We're doing it because we earn a tangible item. Sometimes that might be food. I'm going to do this activity because I know that you're going to give me some candy at the end when I'm all done. And then uh, the fourth function of behavior is automatic reinforcement. And this just means that I'm getting something that I need from this. So an example of that would be if your child maybe has something going on with their mouth. Maybe they're cutting teeth or they've got an infection in their teeth. And when they chew on their clothing, it helps relieve that pressure in their mouth and it feels a little bit better. Or sensory seeking activities are included in this. So your child might engage in behaviors like twirling items or spinning because they like the sensory reinforcement that they get from those behaviors. So those are our functions of behaviors. So our goal as parents is to teach our children how to communicate their needs in a socially appropriate way instead of having to rely on behavior. And this is true Honestly, whether you're parenting a typically developing kid or a kiddo with Down syndrome, our goal is to teach our kids how to function in society and communicate their needs in socially appropriate ways. Um, so, how do we do that? Well, positive behavior supports are what our kids with Down syndrome need. So, when we see our kids engaging in good behavior, we need to give them verbal praise. We need to say, way to go. I love how you're doing this. I love how you are using your fork or your spoon to eat that food. Great job. Way to go. And then we also need to remind our kiddos of expectations very frequently. Just because you think that you have conveyed our routine to the kiddo doesn't mean that that kiddo remembers. And our kids very often are they're very impulsive, right? If they see something that catches their eye, they may forget the rules. So, like when Lily was little, um, big enough to walk and walk independently, a little too big to ride around in the cart, um, but still not really great at walking independently because she loved to run. When we would go to the grocery store, it was not uncommon for her to take off and go find somebody that she wanted to give a hug to. So we worked really hard for probably a year or two before we would go in the grocery store. Before we got out of the car, I'd say, remember, have to walk with mommy in the store. You've got to stay with mommy all the time. If you don't stay with mommy, then we have to hold hands. And she hated holding hands. So that was the biggest consequence she could get. And so when we would go into the store, the store is really big and we were buying a whole week's worth of groceries. So there was no way she could make it through that whole store without reminders. So, when we were first learning, we would give her reminders maybe every 5 minutes. Like if she was doing well, I'd stop and I would reinforce her good behavior. And I would say, hey, I love the way that you're walking with me. Thank you so much. Good job. And then, if I would say, remember, you've got to walk with mommy or else we have to hold hands. Walk with mommy. And I would remind her constantly. It wasn't always perfect. And occasionally we had to hold hands for a while, but I continued to provide her with those reminders of expectations, and it started to work. We also have to remember to be really careful with the words that we use for our kiddo. So we want to tell our kids what we want them to do rather than what not to do. So instead of saying something like, don't throw that, we want to say, can you hand me that? So if you've got a kiddo that's chucking shoes, throwing shoes right and left, instead of saying, don't throw those shoes, try saying, hey, could you bring me those shoes? Could you hand those to me? Because very often our kids don't hear that negative word, the not piece. Instead of stop hitting your brothers, we want to say, like, hey, can you use gentle hands when you touch your brother? Can you give a nice, kind, easy hug to your brothers rather than hitting? Because like our kids don't always get that no part. And imagine if you spent your whole life hearing, don't, stop, no, because that's what we do a lot of the time to our little ones with Down syndrome. We're always telling them, don't do this, don't do that. Instead, we just have to shift our way of thinking and we need to tell them what to do instead. It makes a big difference. Let's see. We also have to think about reinforcers. So, reinforcers are anything that increase the likelihood that a behavior will occur again. So, verbal praise is a really great example of a reinforcer that works well with most kiddos with Down syndrome. So, we want to, when we see a kiddo that's doing something good, we want to say, hey, great job. I love how you're doing that. We want to make sure that we're reinforcing frequently, particularly when they're learning a new skill, and then we can gradually fade it. So, like when Lily was learning to read, she would literally read like one word, and we'd have a party, and then it would be a whole sentence, and we'd have a party, and then it would be a whole page, and we'd have a party, and now she's reading big books, and I'm like, okay, good job, man, because we've just faded that with time. But initially, we were having big parties. So as you're doing something new or working on a new skill, really make it big and reinforce often. We also have to remember that we have to follow through. Um, if we tell our kiddo, first you're going to, I need you to do this activity and then you earn this reinforcer. If the child doesn't do the activity that we wanted, then we can't give them that reinforcer. If I say, I need you to help vacuum the floor, and that child doesn't vacuum the floor, then I can't give them whatever reinforcer they were going to get, right? If it was vacuum the floor and then you get an ice cream cone, if they don't vacuum the floor, they can't have that ice cream cone, because they have to know that they have to do the task in order to earn that reinforcer. We also have to remember that for a reinforcer to be effective, it needs to be something that they don't always have. If I told my child, okay, you go use the potty and then you can have your iPad, and they just spent the last 6 hours looking at their iPad, they're probably going to be like, well, I don't necessarily need that iPad, right? Because I've had it this whole time. So I'd rather not watch my iPad and not go potty, right? So if a reinforcer is going to be effective, have to make sure that it's something that they don't get all the time. We also have to remember we've got to reinforce the good behavior, the things that we want to see, rather than punishing. Punishment is not very effective for a kiddo with Down syndrome. So punishment, right, is trying to limit the likelihood that a behavior is going to occur again. But it just doesn't work well for our kiddos with Down syndrome. They do so much better when you tell them the behavior that you want to see. Show them what to do rather than punishing the bad behavior. And then when you see the good behavior, then reward that. So the problem with punishment for a kiddo with Down syndrome is that some kids with Down syndrome just love to get big reactions. They don't care if it's a good reaction, like a way to go, dude, that was awesome and amazing and I loved it, or a bad reaction like, stop doing that, you can't do that, I'm so mad at you. They don't see the difference between the excited, happy behavior or happy reaction and the mad, angry, negative reaction. For them, it's just a reaction and they feed off of it. So punishment can sometimes look like a really cool reaction that they like. So instead of instead of reacting big, right, and then punishing your kiddo, try to keep your reaction to negative behaviors really neutral. You want to respond. Like, I'm not saying ignore the behavior. You can absolutely make that behavior stop, redirect them. You just don't want to give it a lot of attention. But what you do want to give attention to is your child doing the right thing. When they're sitting down and engaged in something they're supposed to be, like, tell them how impressed you are with them. Make a big party out of it. And when if they take off running from you, if they're eloping, instead of chasing them down, say, stop, get back here, don't run. Chase after them, grab their hand, but do it silently. Grab them and walk them back, and don't give them attention. But do give them attention. Give them big attention when they're sitting engaged in the stuff they're supposed to be doing. Okay, how do we promote strengths now? Well, we can promote some of the strengths. I guess we need to talk about what the strengths are. First, we're going to talk about the strengths and ways to promote them. So our kids with Down syndrome have really great visual memory. We talked about the fact that they struggle with auditory processing, but their visual memory is awesome. So we want to use visuals with our student. So use a visual schedule, something that has pictures of what you're doing throughout the day. Even a first we're going to do this picture, then we're going to do that picture, because our kiddos with Down syndrome really learn well from visuals. They retain that information. We want to make choices visual or pair them, and we can pair those visuals with words or signs. So, if you're struggling to get your child to do something, maybe I could say, hey, do you want to do this or that? What do you think? This or that? And then they can just point to what they want rather than having to verbalize. We want to limit the words we're using when we're giving directions because sometimes we can overtalk our kiddos. So minimize those words and use visuals. And then one of the things that I really love to do is kind of let my daughter lead the way and show me where this is, show me what you want. Because our kiddos have such an amazing ability to like know the world around them and be able to navigate space. So like when we go to the doctors, when we go to the grocery store, I'll say, okay, we need to go here, here, and here. Show me where we're going. And I let her lead the way. And she knows she's got to walk with me because I remind her of those expectations. But she is able to find her way so many places. She can find the restroom in almost any environment we're in because she knows what the restroom sign is, and we kind of let her lead the way, and it is constantly helping and working on that visual memory. And I don't know if you have noticed this. If you have a little one, you probably haven't noticed this yet, but my daughter totally knows her way around like the town that we live in. She even knows the way to my mom and dad's house, and it's an hour and a half away. And if we're going to my parents and I turn the wrong direction, she calls me out. She'll say, Mom, wrong direction or wrong way. And I'm like, yeah, we're just taking a different route this time. It's okay. But she really, she knows her way around places and how to navigate the world. We also know that our kiddos with Down syndrome are really good at socialization. They tend to be so charismatic, and they tend to have really great, strong relationships with their peers. So we want to capitalize on that and promote it. So the first thing we have to do is encourage appropriate boundaries. It can be really tempting to allow our kiddos with Down syndrome to hug everyone and to cross boundaries, but we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we are teaching them those appropriate social boundaries, right? I don't hug people that I don't know. I just wave, hi, if I somebody that I've never met. Because what is cute behavior at 2 years old will not be so cute at 16 years old or at 30 years old. So we've got to make sure we're teaching those appropriate boundaries initially. We want to make sure that we're getting our kiddo involved in activities with their peers. So sign them up for swim lessons, do a youth sports program or an adaptive sports program, like a Challenger Baseball League or Optimus Miracle Movers, or your local community's youth sports program with typically developing peers. There are a lot of really cool theater programs that our kiddos with Down syndrome tend to love to participate in. Special Olympics is such a great athletic program that our kids can participate in. The more we can encourage our kiddos to get out and to be social, the better they're going to do. And lastly, we want to encourage you to get connected. Reach out to your local Down syndrome community. If that's Down Syndrome Indiana, get connected. On our DSI website, we have a link to our DSI weekly newsletter. That is that QR code right here and the link at the bottom of the screen. You can sign up and receive DSI's weekly newsletter with all of the events and activities that we have going on. When you sign up for that, you will also be signed up for our quarterly newsletter that is specific to your child's age. So we have a newsletter for birth to 3, and then we have school-aged newsletter and an adult newsletter. So you'll automatically be signed up for that, and get connected with other families. There are so many amazing people out there in our Down syndrome community. I would highly encourage you to reach out and find someone that you can talk to. If you haven't had the opportunity to meet someone else in our community, or you're looking for a very specific person, reach out to me. I'm happy to get you connected to the person that you're wanting to talk with, whether it be someone with a specific medical diagnosis or in a specific geographical area. We will help make those matches and get you connected. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and share some information about parenting a child with Down syndrome. If you have any questions, you're absolutely welcome to reach out to us at info@dsindiana.org, or you can give us a call at 317-925-7617. Thank you so very much. And again, congratulations on your little one, and we hope to talk with you soon. Thank you.